Welcome to Research Methods. Today we'll be talking about how you would go about writing a discussion section for your research. Just to provide an overview of what we'll be discussing, some of the main things a discussion section will be comprised of are a brief summary of your findings, and summarizing, you wouldn't provide numbers here. That's something you would do in your results section. You'll answer the question, did the results confirm your hypothesis? And if they do confirm your hypothesis, you'll want to indicate that, as well as some possible reasons for why they might not have supported your hypothesis if that's not the case. You'll also tie in how your findings relate to previous research. Does previous research support what you had found, or does it contradict that? And if so, why? You'll want to lay out some strengths and limitations of your research. And one thing that's worth thinking about now is, what are two limitations that everyone in this class has? If they were to conduct a study on just individuals taking this class, well, at least two of them should be that you have a relatively small sample size, as well as all of your participants are college students, and that's going to limit generalizability of your research. So you should talk about that, as well as build on those two things with additional limitations and strengths. You would also discuss directions for future research. What problems did your research not answer? And you'll also, of course, want to touch on the implications of your results. What do they mean for the field, for broader society, and then conclude. So the discussion section has a number of purposes. The three main ones are that this section allows you to interpret your findings, make inferences about them, and connect your results to prior research and theory. So when you're interpreting your results, you want to make sure you do so in the context of your hypothesis. Do the results support your hypothesis? And if not, you'll need to answer why not. You'll make inferences from your results. That means that you're extracting meaning from your results. What does it mean? What do these results indicate? Are there any interesting findings you can generalize from them? And in the method and results sections, you are limited because you have to speak in terms of objective facts about your study. But in the discussion section, you can get a little bit fancier. You can make inferences of your own about what your take on these findings are. And so, again, like I had mentioned, connect your results to previous theory and research that may have informed your research questions to begin with, and also discuss the limitations of your study and future research recommendations as you're closing. So let's unpack a little bit more what we mean when we say interpret the results. You would want to begin the discussion section by restating really briefly the key findings that were already specified in your results, but you would do so in terms of your hypothesis. Like, did it support your hypothesis or not? And summarize using words, not numbers. Numbers can be relegated to your results section. An example of this would be, for your discussion, would be, in line with our hypothesis, the results of this study indicate that alcohol impairs performance on a cognitive test. If you have multiple findings, which many of you will, or you should discuss each of these findings and start with main findings, so the most important ones, to the less crucial findings. You should always address whether or not your hypotheses were supported. If you had multiple hypotheses, you should address each of them and also indicate why they were or were not supported in your opinion. If you don't quite know for sure, bring your best guess and just state why. It could be that it was a methodological issue, a design issue, or that your hypothesis just might be wrong. And if the data do support your hypotheses, you should discuss the inferences that can be drawn from those findings that were in support of your hypotheses. So you'll need to humbly uh, express a hint of caution as you're generalizing from your sample to the population at large, because it's usually the case that things do not map onto the general population perfectly. I would venture to say it's always the case. Now, regardless of whether or not your results supported your hypotheses, you should be sure to connect those findings to theory and research you discussed in your introduction section, because your entire paper should be a cohesive work. So you'll answer the question, are these results in line with previous theory or research? Does the study add to the understanding of a phenomenon, or does it conflict with prior research and therefore lead to additional questions? And you want to speculate why it might be that your findings are not consistent with previous research. So, as I had mentioned before, you'll need to talk about your strengths and limitations in a discussion section. Uh, Examples of this could be the methods that you used, amount of variables tested, the uniqueness of the study, your sample size. It might be the case that maybe you felt that the tools you had, the questionnaires you used, were not really the best for your study, but it's just what you had available. So acknowledging things like that. The reader might already have their perception of what the limitations are, but you are the expert on those limitations, so it's good to give a head start by communicating them. And it also can protect you from criticism as a research writer, because if you're not acknowledging something to the reader, it could imply that maybe you were not aware that this might be a limitation of your study. Uh, you don't necessarily need to be exhaustive because there could be infinite limitations, but you want to hit on the most significant ones. Is there something particularly good or innovative about your study? If so, you should mention that, mention the strengths, and alternately, are there any glaring weaknesses? So you always want to talk about how future research could build on your study, because everything that we're doing as researchers is contributing to a larger body of work. And just as you would want to acknowledge past research and theories and explicate how those come to bear on your study, you should similarly acknowledge the continuity of this work by discussing future work that should be done to build on your research. So those future researchers might end up mentioning your study as past research that informs their research question. So what other studies could be conducted that would build on your study? Also consider what new questions your study raises, what questions your study was not able to answer, and what avenues future research could take in this area. And then always conclude with a closing paragraph that discusses possible practical applications of the research. Because our research is not occurring in a vacuum, we do want to be concerned with the applications of that research and why it matters. So just kind of getting at the significance and the implications of your research. You might feel that it's implied, but it's always important to specify the importance of your study, and just kind of be an advocate for why people should be reading this. So in your discussion, the reader should walk away having read your discussion, able to answer the following questions. What exactly do we now know about the phenomenon under investigation that we did not already before carrying out this research? How does this knowledge align with our predictions or hypotheses? If any hypothesis was not supported, how can we best account for that? How does this study fit in line with previous theories and research? What are the characteristics of the research design or methodology that limit the conclusions that can be drawn from the research? For example, the fact that it's including an all college student sample. What do the findings and the acknowledgement of the limitations indicate for future research? It might be that you want future studies that don't have a specific limitation. What is the significance of the research and the implications for the broader fields within which the research should be understood? So if you've written a discussion section and walk away from it feeling that some of these questions have remained unanswered, then that's likely an indicator that you need to fill in some blanks in your discussion section before you consider it done. And that, my friends, is what you need to know about writing a discussion in psychology research. For now.